Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Miochin. You are watching A News. Here are the headlines. It was an amazing meeting, says Donald Trump after agreeing with China's Xi Jinping to lower tariffs. The US president orders the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons after Russia announced it had tested a nuclear-capable missile. German Chancellor visits Turkey for the first time since taking office, aiming to boost political and economic ties with Ankara. Thank you for tuning in. We start in Busan, where US President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping appear to have made major strides to resolve frictions in the volatile relationship between the world's two largest economies and rival superpowers. The two met on the sidelines of the APEC summit.
President of the People's Republic of China.
US President Donald Trump has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea on Thursday, as both leaders push for a return to the fragile trade war truce between the world's two largest economies. Their meeting follows talks in Malaysia between US and Chinese trade negotiators who reached a framework agreement pending approval from Trump and Xi. Trump had signalled optimism ahead of the meeting, suggesting a trade deal could soon be signed.
It's a great honor to be with a friend of mine, really for a long time now, if you think about it. The very, very distinguished and respected president of China. And we will be having some discussions. I think we've already agreed to a lot of things, and we'll agree to some more right now. But President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time. And it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Trump has said he expects to reduce tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for Beijing's cooperation in curbing exports of chemicals used to produce fentanyl. Xi expressed a willingness to keep working with Trump, saying it was natural for the world's two leading economies to experience occasional frictions.
Since your re-election, we have spoken on the phone 3 times, exchanged several letters and stayed in close contact. Under our joint guidance, China-US relations have remained stable on the whole. Given our different national conditions, we do not always see eye to eye with each other, and it is normal for the two leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then. And in the face of winds, waves and challenges, you and I at the helm of China-US relations should stay the right course and ensure the steady sailing forward of the giant ship of China-US relations.
The meeting in Busan, the first between the two leaders since Trump returned to office in January, concludes the president's trip across Asia.
For more on the Trump-Xi talks, we go to Gyeongju and our Laura Westbrook.
US President Donald Trump described the meeting as amazing and said a lot of decisions were made. On fentanyl, he said Chinese President Xi Jinping had agreed to take stronger action to stop the flow of precursor chemicals for making the drug fentanyl. In response, the United States would cut to 10% from 20% the fentanyl-related tariffs that the US had imposed on China earlier this year. Now, Donald Trump also says the issue of rare earths had been settled with China, pausing its rare earth licensing regime for at least a year. China went into these talks by leveraging its chokehold on the supply of the critical minerals, announcing it was expanding its restrictions on the exports of rare earths. Now, China dominates the global supply of rare earths, which are used in everything from our smartphones to EVs to fighter jets and drones. The US president says they also discussed semiconductors and that NVIDIA would talk to China about exporting chips. But the discussions did not cover the most advanced chips. America has long blocked the sale of advanced semiconductors to China. The other takeaway is Chinese soybean purchases will start immediately, easing the pain on American farmers, who are a key support base of Donald Trump and providing him with a political win. According to the state outlet Xinhua, President Xi says that China and the US should focus on the long-term benefits of cooperation, not getting caught in a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation. He added areas of cooperation lay in areas such as combating illegal immigration and artificial intelligence. Donald Trump is also set to go to China next year, and President Xi will make a reciprocal visit to the United States. What is clear is that tensions have been dialed down, but analysts say the long-term strategic competition remains. Laura Westbrook for A News in Gyeongju.
Despite these speculations, Trump's Asia tour did not include a meetup with North Korea's Kim Jong-un due to a packed schedule. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One, Trump said a meeting would have been disrespectful to talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump, who met Kim several times during his first term, added that he would be willing to return to the region for a meeting in the future. Trump also confirmed plans to return to Asia next April for another meeting with Xi. The US president has ordered the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons. The move follows Russia's announcement of a successful test of its Poseidon nuclear-capable super torpedo.
US President Donald Trump says he has ordered the Department of War to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons. Trump made the announcement on Thursday, citing what he called other countries' testing programs as the reason for his decision. The announcement comes just a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Moscow had successfully tested its Poseidon nuclear-capable super torpedo. The underwater weapon is believed to be an autonomous nuclear-powered torpedo capable of generating massive radioactive ocean waves to make coastal areas uninhabitable.
For the first time, we succeeded not only in launching it from a submarine using its booster motor, but also in igniting the nuclear propulsion system, which the vehicle used for a certain period of time. This is a tremendous success.
After Putin's move, Trump additionally announced the United States will share closely held technology to allow South Korea to build a nuclear-powered submarine. The US has not conducted a live nuclear weapons test since 1992, when then-President George H.W. Bush imposed a unilateral testing moratorium. The moves by both Washington and Moscow signal a potential new phase in global nuclear competition.
13 people, including 6 children, were injured in Russian strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia. The local governor said 5 apartment blocks and several infrastructure sites were also damaged in the attack. Rescuers have been working through the rubble of a residential building, searching for survivors and assessing the damage. Officials said Ukraine imposed nationwide power restrictions following the strikes, which also damaged energy facilities in the region. Russian forces have repeatedly targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure ahead of the winter season, leaving hundreds of thousands temporarily without power. Hurricane Melissa has left a trail of destruction across the Caribbean, from Haiti to Jamaica and Cuba, with dozens killed and thousands displaced. Now it's moving through the Bahamas. The storm continues to unleash heavy rain and flooding.
Hurricane Melissa continues its deadly path across the Caribbean, leaving behind catastrophic damage in Haiti, Jamaica and Cuba. Now downgraded to a Category 1 storm, Melissa is moving across the Bahamas, bringing torrential rain, powerful winds and dangerous storm surges. Authorities say dozens are dead and thousands displaced across the region. In Haiti, at least 25 people have been killed and 18 remain missing, according to the Civil Protection Agency. The southern coastal town of Les Cayes was among the worst hit, where floodwaters swept away homes and families. 10 of the victims were children.
The situation is not good for us. When it's raining, the kids can't sleep. We don't get anything to give them. During the night, we can't rest. We're standing up all the time. No sleep for adults, neither for the children.
In Jamaica, where Melissa made landfall Tuesday as a record-breaking Category 5 hurricane with winds reaching 298 kilometers per hour, at least 8 people were killed. Neighborhoods are submerged and roads buried under mud and debris.
At one stage, I see the water at my waist, and about 10 minutes time, I see it around my neck here, and I make my escape.
More than 3/4 of Jamaica remains without electricity, and initial estimates suggest damages could exceed $22 billion. After pounding Jamaica, Melissa made landfall in Cuba on Wednesday as a Category 3 hurricane, bringing relentless rain and strong winds. In Santiago de Cuba, homes were destroyed and roads cut off by landslides. Cuban authorities said 735,000 people were evacuated before the storm hit, preventing an even greater loss of life. As Melissa moves north through the Bahamas, forecasters warn that life-threatening flooding and powerful winds will continue into Thursday. Across the Caribbean, emergency teams are racing to reach stranded communities as nations grapple with the full scale of Melissa's devastation.
Over in the Netherlands, the centrist liberal D66 party is in a neck-and-neck race with anti-Islam populist Geert Wilders following the Dutch election. With about 2% of the votes still to be counted, the gains the centrists made are likely to give them the lead in the formation of the next government. Here's Anita Sharma with more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where voters went to the polls here in the Netherlands in a snap election that produced one of the tightest outcomes in recent memory. The contest was triggered by the collapse of the previous government earlier this year, and now the vote count points to a major shift in Dutch politics. With roughly 98% of the ballots counted, two parties are locked neck and neck at the top of the results. The centrist Democrat 66, or D66, is projected to take 26 seats. The far-right PVV, or Party for Freedom, led by Geert Wilders, also has 26 seats in the 150-seat House of Representatives. It now seems on track to lose about 11 seats compared to the last election, with the D66 making major gains. The center-right People's Party for Freedom and Democracy is estimated to win about 23 seats, the center-left alliance of the Labour Party and GroenLinks around 20. Key takeaways include a pivot back toward the center in Dutch politics. With the D66 and PVV essentially tied, it seems the far-right surge seen in 2023 has stalled, with the Center Liberal Party managing to capitalize on this. While the PVV may still be a major player, its loss of momentum is striking. The party that helped topple the government this year may now face being shut out of power despite strong ballot box support. From a global perspective, no party comes close to a majority, as a coalition needs at least 76 seats. So if the D66 leads government formation, it must pull together multiple partners, and that takes time. The issues dominating the campaign remain relevant. Migration and asylum policy have not disappeared, but housing shortages, cost of living, and political trust were also decisive. These cross-cutting concerns may make a coherent governing agenda harder to craft. For international audiences, a few points stand out. Mainstream parties ruled out working with PVV, which means even a strong showing may not give Wilders the role many expected. How the next Dutch government positions itself on EU fiscal policy, defense, and migration will matter beyond its borders. A shift toward D66 could favor a more EU-aligned agenda, whereas PVV in government might signal a different path. Either way, we will have to wait and see, as the Dutch have a history of taking months to form a coalition. The uncertainty over coalition formation means Dutch governance may be slower or weaker in the coming months, and that could create a vacuum at the EU level. Some analysts already warn the Netherlands gave up its very central role in EU decision-making in the past year. Yesterday's vote delivered a clear message. Dutch voters are wary of instability and fragmentation, but the outcome is far from the end of this story. As University of Amsterdam professor Henk van der Kolk told me ahead of the election, the real drama begins now, in the days and weeks ahead, as parties negotiate, compromise, and determine who will actually govern. Reporting for A News, I'm Anita Sharma in the Netherlands.
Welcome back. We have some breaking news for you. The Red Cross is on its way to a meeting point in Gaza, where it will receive the coffins of 2 Israeli captives. The Israeli army and Shin Bet security agency have said in a joint statement. Hamas's armed wing said it would hand over the remains of 2 Israeli captives today. We'll bring you more on this when we can. Now, back to our main global story. U.S. President Donald Trump has described trade talks with the Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea as amazing, saying their dispute over the supply of rare earths had been settled and that a trade deal with China could be signed pretty soon. To talk on the outcomes of the meeting, we're joined by Andrew Leung, international and independent China strategist, coming to us from Hong Kong. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. What is your first impression of the meeting? We've heard Trump saying the tariffs are going to be lower, that China is going to buy U.S. soybeans, that there will be a steady supply of rare earths from China to the U.S., but we have heard less from the Chinese side.
Well, my first impression that there is more optics than reality. I mean, starting with President Trump whispering in President Xi's ear, my first reaction was that was it whispering in English or in Mandarin? Either would be a problem. But anyway, so that illustrates my point. There's a lot of optics, and Trump says that the deal, the understanding with China represent 12 out of 10. But you look at what the final result. First of all these tariff numbers are sometimes meaningless, because if you exceed a certain percentage, it doesn't make sense anymore. You can't do business, when the tariffs is over 50% or more. And so you can say 100%, 200%, 1,000%. All these are just sheer numbers out of the top of one's head. It doesn't make sense anymore. But then on the other hand, Trump thinks that he always wins. He can coerce China and bend countries to his will, not only China but other U.S. allies as well. But China has now found a very powerful stranglehold on Americans' Achilles heel, which is, of course, China's dominance in the rare earths supply chain. And not only the supply, because you can find plenty of rare earth in Australia and or even Ukraine and other countries. And for that matter, Greenland. That's why Trump wanted Greenland in the first place. But that's not just the supply, it's the refining, it's the processing, which are very dirty, very complicated, takes decades to perfect. And then in the beginning, because they are highly polluting, no country wanted them, they're all lumped to China decades ago. And China's now perfected the technology and the whole ecology of producing, refining these rare earth elements. Now, these rare earth elements, depending on certain key elements, maybe about a dozen, and China controls over 90% of these key elements, which find is essential use in the United States military complex, including some of the advanced armory, like F-35 fighters. And so And then, because of the effectiveness of this countermeasure, China has recently doubled down on controlling these rare earths by formulating regulations, not only on the export, but also the kind of equipment used to produce them and the intellectual property governing the processing of these rare earths. So the mantra that somehow Trump is winning is only the rhetoric. And of course, at the end of the day, it's not just a trade contest in this meeting. It's no less than a existential rivalry between the two great powers. You're talking about military containment of China in the South China Sea, allying with the Americans' allies, Japan and Korea and Australia, and also painting China into a corner ideologically as China is an evil empire, and using all instruments in this arsenal to contain the rise of China, because there is a bipartisan consensus that China represents an existential threat to American dominance and leadership in the world. So for China, it wants only to grow China as a great power in the world, harking back to a century of humiliation. And China wants to its rightful place in the sun, doesn't necessarily want to displace the United States leadership in the world. But on the other hand, across the aisle, the American geopolitics is extremely worried about China, and there is a bipartisan consensus to contain China, and all these differences are unlikely to be resolved at that meeting or in the coming months.
We've seen this many times over since Donald Trump's return to the White House, the U.S. president being drawn like a magnet to make deals, to announce deals. Now, the U.S. and Chinese trade delegations days ago in Kuala Lumpur said that the main framework and that the main principles are now agreed and aligned. How far would you say that an actual trade agreement on paper is?
Well, of course, the so-called framework agreement only focuses on on President Trump's immediate concerns. His immediate concern, the soybeans, because that would affect his chances in the midterm elections. The soybean producing states are in the Midwest, and they are the Republican Party's main supporters. So the first priority is to get the soybeans back to the United States, and China can accommodate, because the soybeans is not irreplaceable. When China's buying all the soybeans from at the moment, Brazil and Russia, although China has long been the largest customer of American soybeans, because of the trade war, China's diverting its purchases to other areas. And as for the rare earths, China is only suspending the rare earth restriction for 1 year. So you can see that there is an attempt in just a temporary pause, paving the way for a more constructive relationship. At the end of the day, there is a huge difference in the mindset between the two countries in negotiations, between the West and the East, as it were. China's philosophy, they're always happy with the golden mean. Let's meet halfway, 50%. But in this case of the United States under Donald Trump always wants to a winner takes all kind of victory, or at least a lion's share, because he's weaponizing Americans' status as the world's largest economy without realizing that, in fact, China's export to America has now dwindled to less than 10% of China's total. Because China's pivoting to the Global South, which, according to the IMF latest statistics, account for something like 58% of the world global economy. The Global South, of course, including the emerging economies like Turkey and Indonesia and so on. So that in total accounts for 58% of the world, the global GDP, and also even the BRICS plus the new entrants is now bigger than the G7. So I think the world dynamics are changing, and then there's still the contest going on. Trump still believes that he can win 100% over China, and he's touting this meeting with Xi as a total victory, and it's all more optics than reality.
We've heard the Americans following the talks, saying that the U.S. is behind China when it comes to nuclear, but that it will catch up. At the same time, we have a different situation that Washington has with Moscow and these recent nuclear tests. Do you see a possible new nuclear race happening in the world?
Well, as far as the nuclear armament is concerned, I think that nowadays the warheads are multiple times more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then all the three largest stockpile countries, Russia, something like over 4,000 warheads, and the United States nearly 4,000, and China's not even 1,000, probably 600 or 800. But all the stockpiles together can destroy the world, the entire world, many times over. So I think the so-called nuclear war race is more rhetoric because it's a deterrent. I don't think that the United States under Donald Trump wants to go to nuclear war. But of course, with these new weapons Russia is developing, it is a very not easily detectable underwater kind of drone, self-driven, nuclear power-driven kind of weapon. And I think what Trump probably referred to is developing some sort of a strategic weaponry using nuclear power. And that, of course, is understandable because with this kind of weapons, one country can threaten another's dominance, and that's President Trump's response.
And finally, Andrew, I want to ask you, what's next here? As we've seen nothing signed in Busan, would you say that might be the sale of the TikTok U.S. operations, some other deal on rare earths? What is the next practical thing you expect to see in Washington-Beijing relations?
I think let's forget about TikTok for the time being. I mean, the TikTok deal has been signed, sealed, and almost delivered because all the algorithms have been hived off and then placed in control of American White House-dominated companies. So I think that the deal already been reached on TikTok. That doesn't mean that the parent company is going to give up its logarithms worldwide, but that's outside the United States. But as far as the United States is concerned, all the TikTok, all the logarithms, all the data will be safely controlled by United States-dominated companies. So that I think let's forget about that for the time being. But as far as the next step, of course, what Trump wants hope for is a meeting again in Beijing in return for President Xi coming to perhaps Mar-a-Lago and at least presenting the uptick that the two countries are now on good terms and everything's under control. But as I said, as I pointed out, there's a fundamental differences and structural differences between the trajectory of these two countries. China wants to regain its place in the sun, having suffered from the decade of humiliation, and China is progressing steadily towards the two centenary goals. The first centenary goal, 2021, already reached when China will become a moderately well-off country. That already been achieved with 800 million people who lived out of poverty, and there is more middle class. But the second centenary goal is 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of China's the founding of People's Republic of China, by which time China hopes to become an advanced socialist country on a par with some of the leading powers in the world. And that would lead in a lot of geopolitics. And as I said, there's a bipartisan consensus in the United States to contain China's rise, to prevent China from challenging Americans' dominance.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insights and views.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at what's happening in the region. Turkey and Germany have high potential in the defense industry and must focus on joint projects. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said at a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Ankara. Merz, who's on his inaugural visit to Turkey, said he sees Ankara as being close to the side of the European Union. German Chancellor's visit focused on bilateral relations, foreign policy, and cooperation on economics, migration, and security. Talks were also set to cover regional security issues, including the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that his ministry is pursuing a policy of provincial diplomacy to promote Iran's relations with the neighboring countries. Artura Shiralilu has more on that in Tehran.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi stressed the role of trade and cultural exchanges between the border provinces and the neighboring countries, saying the foreign ministry is supporting what he termed the provincial diplomacy to further bilateral ties with neighbors. Speaking at a conference in Tabriz University on Wednesday, he said that the northern and northwestern Iranian provinces of East Azerbaijan and West Azerbaijan, Gilan and Ardabil can play again the historical role of serving as gateways to enhance relations with regional countries, including Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, and Turkey. Araghchi added that the foreign ministry has the implementation of the policy of provincial diplomacy on its agenda, so that Iran's diplomatic missions can establish effective ties with the provincial capitals and help develop trade, people-to-people exchanges, and cultural cooperation. Last week, the Iranian foreign minister opened the provincial diplomacy conference in the northeastern city of Mashhad, in which he stated that economic ties with the neighboring countries are the breathing space in the wake of sanctions, saying that majority of bilateral issues can be reviewed and resolved at border areas. He added that Iran's priority in foreign relations is its immediate neighbors and next, the nearby countries in the region. According to Araghchi, smugglers and terrorists do not cross the borders through which goods are exchanged and passengers traveled. As the saying goes, he has stated, if local officials in border provinces reach agreements with their neighboring provinces, the borders will function as borders of peace. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A-News.
The U.S. has reportedly asked Azerbaijan to join the proposed international peace mission in Gaza. A-News has learned that while Baku has yet to make a final decision, its participation would depend on a UN Security Council mandate granting full international legitimacy.
The United States has asked Azerbaijan to join a stabilization force in Gaza, a proposed international mission to secure the territory once the fighting stops and humanitarian access expands. According to information obtained by News, Baku has not yet reached a final decision. Azerbaijan's position is firm. Any participation must rest on a United Nations Security Council resolution that grants international legitimacy and sets a clear mandate. This mission is not a classic UN peacekeeping operation. It is envisioned as a multinational stabilization force, similar to the peace-building framework seen after the Balkan conflicts, designed to secure key sites, ensure aid delivery, and prevent the return of armed confrontation while political structures take shape. The International Stabilization Force is a proposed US-backed multinational mission tasked with maintaining security, facilitating humanitarian aid, and overseeing reconstruction in Gaza once hostilities cease. The initiative seeks to prevent renewed violence, assist with rebuilding essential infrastructure, and support a transition towards stable governance. The United States is not expected to deploy its own troops. Instead, Washington aims to assemble a coalition of trusted regional and international partners, with Azerbaijan seen as a credible contributor capable of providing both diplomatic balance and experience in strategic peace efforts. Reports in Israeli media say the concept was discussed recently between US Vice President J.D. Vance and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as Washington and its partners explore options for a post-war security framework in Gaza. Azerbaijan's approach on Gaza has remained consistent. Baku coordinates with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Arab League, and the wider Islamic world, stressing that Arab states must first establish a unified vision for Gaza's future before outside actors step in. Sources say Arab partners have taken note of Azerbaijan's balanced posture, rooted in long-standing ties with the Islamic world and cooperation with Palestine. Diplomacy now moves to New York, and as the region walks a fragile path towards stability, Azerbaijan sits at the crossroads of regional responsibility and emerging global expectation.
Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has said that peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan is already a reality, calling it a historic change for the region. Speaking at the Paris Peace Forum, Pashinyan said he's confident the Armenian people support the progress made so far. He also described the proposed Trump Route project as one that could bring in a new stage in international trade relations. Pashinyan added that establishing diplomatic ties and opening borders with Turkey is now only a matter of time. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan and the United States are looking to further deepen their economic partnership. During bilateral talks, the two sides focused on expanding trade and investment cooperation across several sectors. Kazakhstan's prime minister said that his country continues to implement systematic measures to create favorable conditions for foreign businesses. During the meeting, the parties discussed prospects for expanding trade ties and strengthening investment cooperation. The discussions covered a broad range of sectors, such as digital development, energy, agriculture, transport, and logistics. According to the National Bank of Kazakhstan, the U.S. has invested a total of $61.2 billion in the country since 1993. Afghanistan discussed establishing a Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan transit corridor, including the Herat-Turgundi Railway. Kazakh Deputy Prime Minister called Afghanistan a key trading partner. He highlighted significant increases this year in Kazakhstan's exports of wheat, sunflower oil, petroleum products, and commercial vehicles. The talks also covered cooperation in mining, automotive, and construction, with Kazakhstan ready to increase supplies of locomotives and commercial vehicles. In climate news, $250 million from the Green Climate Fund is set to be invested to help communities in Central Asia, South Caucasus, and Pakistan adapt to the effects of melting glaciers. The initiative could change the lives of millions. Our Fariza Kalimurzina brings more.
The Green Climate Fund has approved $250 million in financing for the Asian Development Bank's initiative From Glaciers to Farms, covering Central Asia, the South Caucasus, and Pakistan. The program will strengthen water security and support agriculture across the region. It will cover 9 countries and focus on major river basins such as the Naran, Pyanch, Kura, and Suot. Overall, around 13 million people are expected to see tangible improvements in their access to water and agricultural support. The issue of glacier melt was among the key topics at the UN Climate Conference COP29. According to scientists, in Tajikistan alone, out of 14,000 glaciers, more than 1,000 have already disappeared completely, and the melting is accelerating. While the Glacier program is helping communities secure water and support agriculture, Kazakhstan is taking action in a different way. Their drones are set to plant special seeds that bury themselves in the soil, helping to bring life back to the dried bed of the Aral Sea. This technology is expected to strengthen the soil, reduce dust and salt in the air, and gradually turn a devastated landscape back into a living ecosystem. The Aral Sea has become a symbol of one of the world's largest environmental disasters. Its surface area has shrunk by 90%, leaving millions of hectares hectares of salt flats that generate toxic dust storms. Environmental experts estimate that tens of billions of tons of salt are carried by winds across thousands of kilometers, reaching as far as the Arctic and the Himalayas. And now, thanks to new technologies and international cooperation, the region has a chance to bring life back to a place that once seemed lost forever. Fariza Kalimurdina, Almaty, A News.
Welcome back. As we've mentioned earlier, the Kazakh Prime Minister met with U.S. Special Envoy for South and Central Asia to discuss boosting cooperation, trade and investment. To talk on the meeting and broader bilateral relations between Kazakhstan and the U.S., we're joined by Nurbulat Nishimbayev from the Turan University in Almaty. Welcome, Nurbulat. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, with this meeting and all discussed, things seem to be moving quickly between Kazakhstan and the U.S. across all spheres. What would you say is driving this partnership forward, and what are the main benefits each side can hope for?
For sure. This week, Kazakhstan hosted Special Envoy on South and Central Asia of the Trump administration to Kazakhstan. Next week is expected to be held a summit in Washington, C5+1 with the United States. So I would like to mention a few moments. The first thing is now the United States is looking back his foreign policy on Central Asia, because we have seen since 2021 the America's role in the Central Asia was quite passive. Now United States are taking a new vision, new foreign policy direction to Central Asia based on the investments and bilateral trade relations. So the second part is United States is focusing to Central Asia, in particular to Kazakhstan, to the rare material resources, because Kazakhstan as a country who has a vast amount of rare natural resources is becoming one of the hotspots for the United States. So here I would like to mention another point. Now it's the United States looking back to the Central Asia, not as a single state, but as a region with a whole. So therefore, United States foreign policy on the Central Asia will be a little bit different comparing to the early 2000s, when they looked at Central Asia as a buffer zone, as a place who are fighting against terrorism regarding the Afghanistan and regarding the Taliban. But now United States regime, United States vision to Central Asia is interlinked with the natural resources. Second, with the trade logistic hubs, increasing role of the China. So to sum up, the Central Asia is becoming now, Central Asia is creating a new rule of the game, the balance of power, with China on the one hand and Russia on the other hand, United States and European Union.
Well, you've touched upon the upcoming summit of the C5+1 in Washington. This is the first highest level gathering in the White House. Now, you spoke on China's influence in Central Asia. We know that it's a strong presence in the form of loans, infrastructure projects. Russia's influence seems to be waning as its invasion of Ukraine goes on. Do you see that Washington is trying to maybe make use of the situation and gain a foothold, a geopolitical foothold in Central Asia?
Surely. During the Biden administration, we have seen total change of the White House foreign policy to Central Asia, but I think now that Trump is taking a new concept regarding Central Asia, because the Central Asia for the United States is very vitally important for two reasons. The first is, of course, it's the main trade routes of China sending the items to Europe by land route. So therefore, United States doesn't want to lose the sphere of influence in Central Asia. So therefore, they are looking at the strategic foreign policy regarding this one. Of course, the role of the China is increased over the years regarding the logistical hubs and the change of the foreign policy direction. Also, we have seen some role of the Russia. But however, the role of the Russia in Central Asia is rapidly changed over the 3 years since the beginning of the conflict with Ukraine. So therefore now United States, I think they are reconsidering taking active foreign policy in our region.
How much would you say that Central Asia is making use of its position right now, not only in the geopolitical circumstances, but as the doorway between the East and the West, particularly when it comes to the Middle Corridor?
Exactly. It's a time for Central Asia making a choice. It's a time for Central Asia, transformative time. So therefore, it really depends on the Central Asian leaders, the first. The second is individual states to have a common and long-term vision to make in this transformative moment Central Asia as a bridge between Asia and Europe. In this case, for Central Asia, which they have built over the last 30 years, so-called multi-vector foreign policy. So having multi-vector and having hedging influence with the great powers in the region is a number one criteria having a balanced foreign policy. So in order to have multi-vector and independent so-called foreign policy for Central Asian states, it's very important to have multilateral relations with every single interested great powers in our region. So United States is one of them right now.
What kind of a investment role do you see for the United States in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia? Is it just these rare raw materials? Is it green energy? What's your next bet on U.S. investments in the region?
Historically, American companies, they are focused on the oil and gas production because they came quite earlier during the 19th. On the west of Kazakhstan, much of the successful American companies still working, but now Central Asia returning back with not only resources and oil and gas, but the new investment aspects, which I have already mentioned, so-called rare materials, but as well as on the technological aspects, I think, on the logistical aspects, because on the last visit of the President Tokayev in September with White House, Kazakhstani companies, they made $1 billion contract with the train construction works. So therefore, I think United States is entering to the logistic and communication aspects as well. Not only for Kazakhstan, but for Uzbekistan, for the rest of the Central Asian countries.
And finally, do you expect any stronger political messages coming from the White House from the November summit?
Surely, the first thing is this time is very symbolic because the United States Special Envoy came to Central Asia. At the same time, the president itself, Donald Trump, is meeting with the president of China, Xi Jinping, in South Korea. So now I think White House is totally reconsidering the agendas foreign policy regarding the Asian countries. So therefore, we shouldn't underestimate upcoming summits. The upcoming summit is not expected a symbolic meeting, but it should create a new vision for the Central Asian countries, in particular changing on technological aspect and both between the companies. So also it's the time for Central Asian countries not only to look like a investment seeker, but it's time to grow up and making investment, bringing opportunity to Central Asian business people to the United States and vice versa. So therefore, upcoming summits, I think there will be three main agendas. Of course, the first one, investment. The second one, logistics. The third one is the security policies. Because when it comes to the geopolitics and the security, it's very important having some common vision, at least, to have talk on this one.
Nurullah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your
insight. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching. That's all we had for you for now. But stay tuned to A News.